So you did it. You made it into University Scholars, one of the most prestigious majors at Baylor University. Congratulations! You're excited and industrious as you're working through your classes. Then, midway through the semester, you're invited to a meeting about something called your reading list. Turns out you have to read a ton of books and talk about them in front of your professors. Oh, and it's graded. Wait, what? You think? I don't remember signing up for this.
Cut the cameras.
If this story sounds familiar, you, like many university scholars before you, were shocked by the prospect of the University Scholars exit interview, and believe it or not, I was in exactly the same boat. However, I ended up finishing my reading list a year early, and I got the highest possible score. And if I can do it, you absolutely can. I'm here to give you all of my tips, advice, and recommendations for the exit interview, so let's do this thing. First, do some self-reflection. I invite you to answer two questions. One, what is your course of study? And two, what are the type of books that you're interested in? The first question, your course of study, is actually pretty important when you're choosing your books. So if you're a political science concentration and then you're going to be reading political science books on your reading list, it'll make more sense to you because these are the books that you're studying in your regular classes or books that you might have an interest in or have shaped the political theories that you're studying to this day. So obviously when you're in your exit interview, you'll be able to answer questions about these much more easily. And you say, oh, I know all about Leviathan because that has to do with my local lessons on tyranny that I took at Baylor University. And then you can talk all about that. Another one to consider is what type of books that you like to read. Are you a total science geek who loves reading about the treatises of Galileo, or are you more of a literature snob who likes Jane Austen? Both of those are totally valid and can be explored in your exit interview. If you're reading books that you actually like in a style or genre that you really enjoy, you're going to want to read them more, and likely you'll remember them better. But if you have no idea what type of books that you want to read, or you're just not really familiar with the books on the reading list, I would recommend skewing towards narratives or stories. The reason is that during your exit interview, one thing that you might want to address is kind of the beginning, middle, and end arc of a story. So you can say, oh, this hero behaves in a rage-filled manner, i.e. Achilles at the beginning of the Iliad, but at the end he's able to reconcile with Priam, showing that he's moved beyond his rage-fueled manner that he behaved at the beginning of the book. Now, how was I able to just pull that up? It's because I know the narrative arc of the story of the Iliad, and stories behave that way. Philosophy treatises, scientific treatises, works of political philosophy oftentimes don't work that way. An important thing to note is you will have to include some diversity in your reading list. If you're wanting to go all in for political science, sorry to disappoint you, but there is a stipulation when you're making your reading list that you don't choose works of just one genre. Another thing to be familiar with is the rating system. Your reading list will be divided into 3 sections: ancient, medieval, and modern. Within those 3 sections, you will have to accumulate 15 points. Now, what are points, Sophie? You might be asking. Let me explain to you. When you're given the list of books that you choose from, the books will be rated on a scale from 1 to 3. There is one 4, it's Don Quixote. If you read Don Quixote, it is so long, like props to you. If you want to do that, go for it. Would not be me. They're rated, most of them, on a scale of 1 to 3, 1 being the easiest and 3 being the hardest. You have to accumulate 15 points in each category when you're doing your exit interview. So you may be tempted to say, oh, I'll just do 5 3-level books and get that out of the way. I would advise highly not to do that. On the whole, I think the ratings are very fair. The books that I read that were 1s were nice kind of brain breaks, are usually easier and or a lot shorter than the books that are the 3s, which are much more dense, have a lot of kind of philosophy or big ideas going on behind them, and or they're very, very long. So you're just going to gas yourself out if you're doing 5 3s just trying to work your way through a period. What I would recommend is doing 1 or 2 3s and then interspersing the rest of them with 1s and 2s. This is the method that I had, and I thought that it was just the best for me personally. I enjoyed having the kind of headier books where I could examine more deeply and do more research and digging into that, but then having 1s and 2s just kind of pop off and be more like fun books. If reading totally isn't your forte and you're like, none of these books sound fun, sorry, I have some recommendations later if you guys are interested. I can recommend some of the books that I thought were maybe softer 2s, which I really enjoyed, some 1s that I thought were super, super easy, and some ones that I just really enjoyed. A lot of them are so much fun. I'd recommend picking the brains of people who have done their exit interview before and finding out some of their favorite books, and I can leave my recommendations if any of you guys are interested. You've finished your reading list and you're ready to get started. Now what? First things first, you need to make a reading schedule. A lot of students complete their University Scholars exit interview reading during their winter breaks and summer breaks, but sometimes they do it during the school year. My case was a little bit different. My spring semester got cut short because of coronavirus stuff, so we were all sent home, and I had a lot of extra time on my hands, so I figured I might as well just go ahead and get started and finish off my reading list. So I started kind of chugging my way through the books in March and finished probably around June or July, I believe, definitely before August. My case is a little bit different because I had extra time. I guess you might say I had an extended summer break, but it's entirely possible to do it just during breaks alone, whether that's your summer breaks or your winter breaks. But I would advise getting it done sooner as opposed to later. You do not want to be cramming for your exit interview. So a way to keep on track of this is to make a reading schedule. You can allot whichever books you're going to read during which breaks, or go ahead and start writing down in a planner of some sort or whatever you use to organize the pages that you're going to read every day. This is how I did it with my planner. I kind of divvied up the book based on however long I wanted to read it. So if I wanted to read the Iliad in a week, then I divide the page numbers by 7 and then just plug through those each day. I usually only read one book at a time. I didn't like doubling up because it kind of gets confusing after a while and you like to stay on track. The second and most important thing, if you take anything from this video, please, I am begging you, listen to this, keep a journal. This might sound tedious or it might sound hard, but this is the single most important thing that will influence how well you do on your exit interview. I promise you, and that is keeping a journal. I kept a journal for all of my works and I figured I'd break down for you guys right now how I started keeping my notes and then the structure that I had it. So let's do this. First things first, I listed off the title, the date, the author, and the cultural historical period. So a lot of these I just had to look up if you don't know what a cultural historical period is. It's things like British Romanticism or Modernism. If you don't know the cultural historical period of your text, just look it up on Wikipedia, SparkNotes, etc. It'll be really easy and they'll just dash it right off for you. Wikipedia is a great resource for finding those in particular. Once I'd figured out that, my next section was plot. I would advise you to kind of play loose when it comes to plot summarizing. You want this summary to be something that you can glance over and re-familiarize yourself with, but not a slavish reproduction of the entire text. So you don't have to copy down every specific detail, just general plot structure is something I'd advise that you go ahead and write down. You can glance over that and you're like, oh yeah, that's what happened in the middle of the Song of Roland, and then you'll be good to go. The next section I made notes of as well were themes and symbols. Some of these I actually kind of picked up for my own when I was reading on the text, but admittedly, a lot of them I borrowed from SparkNotes and Cliff Notes. I know I use SparkNotes and Cliff Notes for part of my studying, don't kill me, but these are great for theme and summaries, but they are not good for reading the entire text, and that is because in your exit interview, while they will generally ask you to make themes and connecting questions, a way to demonstrate that you've read deeply and critically is by elucidating details. And you can't do that if you're just reading the SparkNotes summary. Do not SparkNotes your exit interview books. It will go poorly for you. And especially the university scholars professors who skew more towards the literature side, they will know and they will out you. So don't do it. Read all your books. It's not extremely hard. You can do it. I believe in you. Read your books. Themes. Writing down some themes and symbols is also a great way to be able to make connections between different texts. You say, oh, Lucretius talks about free will, and so does Martin Luther, but they have totally different interpretations of it. That's another great way to kind of keep track of these key ideas, which you can trace through all the different eras that you're studying in your text. Next, I'd also make note of the cultural historical period again, but just going into a little more detail about how our text in particular is dealing with that. So you can say, oh, this happened during the Roman Republic and there was some political turmoil. So Lucretius is dissatisfied with the Roman god. You can also get a lot of this from Encyclopedia Britannica, has some really great short resources on the specific text that you're going to be studying. Wikipedia is a great way as well. And again, SparkNotes, I believe in particular, has a section that has to do with cultural and historical context. Another great thing to know so you can make those connections outside of the text. And the final one is honestly the most fun, which is just my genuine, unfiltered impressions. So you can say, oh my gosh, I absolutely hated this book. I despise the way this and this and that. Be kind of specific about the things that you didn't like, because it's okay to not like the books. In fact, you can bring that up in your exit interview and say, oh, I despise this book. I couldn't believe that this and that. Of course, you'll have to back it up for some reason. You can't just say, oh, I hated this book. And then maybe that's that professor's favorite book and then you get asked. Maybe playing it off of a different book that did whatever you disliked better, etc. Or you can say things that you found funny or cute or intriguing. One of the things I still remember to this day is that Lucretius thought that lightning happened when clouds rubbed against each other like flintstones and then the lightning shot out like sparks. I just thought that was so funny for some reason. So I wrote it down in my journal because I was like, wow, this is really interesting. So when I was during my exit interview and I was asked to just like name things that I remembered about Lucretius, I could just rattle off a bunch of these really fun, weird science things that he thought were true. And this shows that you've done a deep and critical read of the text. These are details that SparkNotes and Cliff Notes won't give you, and they really kind of show you off to the exit interview committee because they show that you've read and that you've engaged with this text in a meaningful manner. Once you finish your reading list or you're close to it, it's time to start to think about scheduling your exit interview. First thing you're going to need to do is sign up for the exit interview class, and once that's completed, then you'll have to start brainstorming who you want to be the 3 people on your panel. So the University Scholars exit interview panel is comprised of 3 people. First is the University Scholars professor. You have no choice in whoever they appoint to be on your panel. Second is a professor of your own choosing, and this can be really whoever you want. They don't have to be literature, history, or philosophy. I've heard a lot of people do their STEM professors, I've heard a lot of people do education, etc. So it can really be whoever you want. This professor is going to be an advocate for you. They know that you've been in their classes and presumably you've done great work in their classes, and they're here to kind of show you off and then ask you some probing questions, but they're also there to be a representative for you and an ally for you. So choose someone who you have a good relationship with who you think will represent yourself well. I chose my great text professor. I've actually heard that STEM professors are harder than literature or humanities-oriented folk because humanities people all kind of speak the same language of, literary analysis and criticism and that sort of thing. So these ideas, these themes that you'll be talking about won't really be new to them. But for your science professor who's never read the Iliad before, they might ask a question that's totally out of left field that you're like, whoa, I was not expecting that, just because their minds are kind of wired in a different way. The third person is a senior scholar. This is someone who's completed their exit interview before. They're also here to really be an advocate for you. It can be someone you know, it can really be whoever has done their exit interview before you. If you don't have anyone that you want to do, or if you want me to be your senior scholar, I'd be glad to do it. Drop it in the comments, I got you, we'll talk. But choosing someone who's maybe a friend of yours or someone who's familiar with something you're studying, someone who's been in some class with you, ideally maybe humanities or literature related classes would be a great pick for senior scholar. So, you've finished your reading list and you're good, right? You've read all those books, congratulations. Are you ready to start your exit interview? No, wrong, incorrect. As exciting as it is that you finished your reading list, now you need to study for it. That's because exit interview doesn't necessarily test your knowledge of these specific books in detail or in isolation. What it wants you to do is have the ability to make connections between them. And to do that, you need to refamiliarize yourself with the text and the common themes that they present. Here's how I did that, and again, the system's gonna vary for everyone, but this is the way that worked for me, and I feel like it worked out pretty well, so I'll share it with you. First things first, I made a breakdown of all of the text with a 1-page summary and then a transcription of my notes that I had made in my journal. So first of all, I made a table. I'll have it on the screen here so you guys can kind of see what I did. First of all, I had the title of the work, the author, the year, and then the cultural historical period. Next, I had a very brief synopsis of the plot summary. So take this and then just kind of use the summary that you have in your notes and then break it down to be even shorter because you want this all to fit on 1 page. After that, I included a little bit more about the cultural historical period, some notes on the themes and symbols, and then in that concluding part, just my final kind of silly or impressions that I remembered. After that, I transcribed my entire plot summary from my journal. This is why the journal is so key. If you keep a good journal, you'll never have to reread any of these texts again, unless you want to, but I wouldn't recommend it. Another important thing about this is if you're doing it on some form of word processor, whether that's Word or Google Docs, you will be making a searchable digital resource. So if you remember that someone's talking about free will or the ideas of freedom or individuality, and you wonder about other texts about that too, you can Control F or Command F on your keyboard and then search all of your notes and all of your other documents that you've created. They want you to be able to make connections between the texts not only in the same cultural historical period, but also between epochs and times and the divisions of your University Scholars reading list. Another thing that I did was make a Quizlet. In complete honesty, I don't know how much this helped me, only because it's really hard to make Quizlets for things about literature. So what I usually use the Quizlets for was for characters, themes, main ideas, and very basic stuff about plot. So for instance, like who are Priam's children in the Iliad, what does the symbol of masks mean until we have phases, etc. These are things that you can actually test more easily on a Quizlet or a flashcard system. For Quizlet, I use the Learn system, so if you get a question wrong, they'll make you redo it a couple of times, and then that really helps solidify the ones that I didn't know, and just shore up some detail work that I might not have known otherwise. But honestly, I think that you could probably forego the Quizlet system if you know your notes really well. Lastly, I printed that entire document that I just told you about with my 1 page and then the plot summaries and then annotated it. But I also doodled all my way through these, and you could just make it as fun as you want. I can be more of a visual person, so having a silly drawing or picture to help elucidate some of these ideas that these texts are describing was actually really helpful for me personally in remembering certain things. So just go crazy, have fun with it. This doesn't have to be boring or a chore. It can be something that's really fun and exciting to just draw and doodle around with. So just go ham and have fun with it. We've finally reached the actual exit interview itself. This is probably the part that you've all been waiting for. Super excited to examine some of this stuff with you. First of all, one thing that I wanted to note is what you actually need to know for the exit interview. And it's not what you might think. The most important thing not only is a knowledge of the text and its themes, but the ability to make connections between different texts. Ideally, you'd be able to make a connection between any of the two texts on your reading list, and that might sound scary, but it's actually not that bad. A lot of these texts are dealing with similar ideas, whether that's freedom, order, life, death, free will, why are we here, what does it mean to be human? And if you're able to make a connection between how one text does that and how another one does, then you have that point of contact that you're able to examine in your exit interview. Those are the questions I'll be asking. The exit interview is not an interrogation. They're not going to ask you the third person that Patroclus killed when he took on Achilles' armor. That would be pretty ridiculous. My first question that I received was about Lucretius on the nature of things. They basically just asked me to talk about what I remembered, and when I tell you I went off. I was able to bring up ideas from all the different books that I remembered, and also the kind of random things like I told you about with the lightning and the flint. I was like, that's so weird and funny. How crazy is that? I probably talked for like maybe 5 minutes straight. I'm sure they were like, oh my gosh, this girl, what? The construction of the journal is made in such a way that is beneficial to the exit interview questions that they will specifically be asking you. And those are particularly relating to themes and connecting text, which is why I'd highly advise making that journal, reading through your notes, refamiliarizing yourself with the themes and symbols of the text and how they relate to each other. Super, super important. Your panelists are not looking to fail you. In fact, the exit interview is rated on a scale of 1 to 5. Like, outstanding is the best one and failing is the lowest one, but all the other 4 are passing. So long as you don't do the absolute worst, then you're going to pass. I've only heard of a couple of people who like actually failed their exit interview because it is really hard to do. I'd also advise you to really bring your personality to the exit interview. The professors do a lot of these over time, and if you're able to bring in some fun ideas or a positive attitude, this will really stand out. I'm a total great text and literature person, so when I went in, I was just super enthused and really happy to just talk about all of these texts. It was so much fun for me. But even if you're not really great text or literature or history, you can still have so much fun in your exit interview. These texts are surprisingly hilarious and bawdy and weird and so relevant to our modern society. You can address all of these things in your exit interview. I would so invite you to bring in your respectfully presented opinions and ideas and enthusiasm when you're coming into the exit interview. Thanks so much for sticking with me for all of this video. I hope there was some good advice in here. I finished my exit interview and I did pretty well on it. So if you guys have any specific questions, if you have anything else that you'd like to know, please let me know in the comments below. I'm more than happy to answer any of your questions, sit on your exit interview panels, give you all the advice that you might need. Just let me know. I've super enjoyed my exit interview, so I'm glad to kind of pass on advice to anyone who's going to be taking it as well. Like I said, any questions you have, leave them in the comments about USchool, Baylor, what have you. Super excited to hear from you guys, and thanks for watching.